सत श्री अकाल एंड वेलकम टू सीजे सिद्धू शो। जिस तरह तुहानूं पता ही है कि एवरी थर्सडे असीं तुहाडे रूबरू होईदा थोड़ी गल कराई दी है मोस्टली पॉलिटिशियंस नाल, पर समटाइम्स डिपेंडिंग कम्यूनिटी की चल रहा है, मैंटल हैल्थ इशूज़ है, ड्रग इशूज़ है, पीपल आर dealing with a lot of stress. It's a holiday season we're heading to, and and it's a lot of issues around that. So sometimes मैं उन्हां दे एक्सपर्ट जिहड़े हैगे उन्हां दी ओपीनियन लैके आईदा, पर normally politicians from all stripes, municipal or provincial or federal, and regardless of their party affiliations, they all are welcome on my show. ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਬੜੀ objectively ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਵੱਧ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਈ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ lately there is a debate happening what journalists and media can do. Media have to stay non-partisan. Yeah, we have our own opinions, we have our own personal thinking about certain things, that's fine. But you can't change the fact, so facts have to stay facts. It's raining today, that's fact. If it's a sunshine, that's a fact. We can't change that. So reading between the lines and giving your opinion is fine too, but you can't change the facts. So having said that, मेरे शो का always ਮੰਤਵ ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ कि ਜਿਹੜੇ people मेरे शो ਤੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਨੌਲੇਜ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਵੱਧ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਫਸਟ ਹੈਂਡ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਈ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਮੇਕ ਯੂਰ ਓਨ ਓਪੀਨੀਅਨਸ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਆਪ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਓਪੀਨੀਅਨ ਤੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ BC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ, leader of BC Conservative Party, stepped down or pushed out basically because 20 MLAs given a letter. He said, no, I'm staying put. But the pressure built up ho janda ya, and then he didn't have a choice and he resigned, and so interim leader Halford, my area MLA, and he's interim leader, but he already said that he will be not running for the leadership. So ਹੁਣ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਨੂੰ ਪਊਗਾ, ਬੜਾ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਹੈ। ਉਹੀ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਮੇਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਊਗੀ। ਸੋ ਸੀ ਵਟ देयर ਓਪੀਨੀਅਨ ਇਜ਼, ਐਂਡ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ कि पाइपलाइन का काफ़ी रौला पिया सीगा, उत्थे वोट भी कंजरवेटिव ने जो रखे, दे लॉस्ट दैट लाइक इन बिग टाइम। सो यदा मतलब है जो कनेडियंस है दे मोर एंड मोर इन फेवर ऑफ pipelines, because we can't walk away from having an infrastructure built or these big companies built if we want to compete with America especially and want to do business with Asia and other European countries. We have to be self-sustained and ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਦੇ ਪੈਰਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਖੜਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ। ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਡਿਫੀਕਲਟ ਡਿਸੀਜ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਣਾਉਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਟ ਟੇਕਸ ਈਅਰਸ ਟੂ ਬਿਲਡ ਥੀਸ ਥਿੰਗਸ, ਐਂਡ ਸੋ ਇਟ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ। ਲੈਟਸ ਸੀ ਵਟ ਹੈਪਨਸ। ਮਾਰਕ ਕਾਰਨੀ took a very bold decision, and Premier Daniel Smith of Alberta is very happy about it. She getting a backlash as well in Alberta for a number of reasons, and let's see what happens, because bringing her on the fold, because they start talking about separatism and separating from Canada, and those kind of emotions die down a little bit, that the federal government is listening to Alberta as well. So ਇਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ, ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੀ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ I couldn't find a better person, very well versed, Elenore Sturko. She is MLA, and she ran first time in a by-election in 2022 from BC Liberal Party. Then it became BC United. Kevin Falcon asked her to run, and then she ran from South Surrey riding, and then she moved to last election Surrey Cloverdale, September 22, 2025. Then she have an issue, we will talk about it, removed from the BC Conservative Caucus. It will be interesting to find out a lot about that. And so she's graduated from Kamloops Senior Secondary School, was in a broadcasting business with CFJC TV in Kamloops, and then she was a reservist with the Canadian Forces. Boy, she have a big resume. Then, as you know, lately she was a RCMP, Staff Sergeant, was a spokesperson for Surrey Police, not Surrey Police, Surrey RCMP, and then she in the politics. Welcome to CJ Sidhu Show, Elenore.
Thanks for having me on again.
You very welcome. So what's happening in your world, or political world?
Oh my gosh, what a world we're in right now. Hey, a lot happening in politics. I think you talked about on the national scene what's happening with, all the talk of the pipeline, our economic situation that we're in right now. And of course, then in the party politics, there's some changes and upheaval that's happened. It's been quite an interesting year that I've had for sure. And right now I'm sitting as an independent for Surrey Cloverdale.
Okay, so you're sitting as an independent. Now, you probably had an issue with John Rustad, and then you left the BC caucus, stepped down.
No, I didn't step down. I was fired.
Oh, you were fired. So I didn't want to use that.
No, that's okay.
Word.
I think it's important for people to know, and I'll be honest about the reason.
Yeah.
Like we now know that there was a number of people in the caucus that had issues with the leadership that John was, how he was leading the party. And I had been talking about that behind closed doors with other members of the caucus. And because John Rustad found out that I'd had those conversations, he fired me for that. So we now, sorry. No, I'll let you do your translation.
No. Well, not a translation, but मैं summarize करदा हुन्ना. मैं इन्हां नूं कहा सी भी ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਟੈਪ ਡਾਊਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ BC ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਂ ਫਾਇਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਮੰਗਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਫਾਇਰ ਤਾਂ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਵਰਡ ਹੈ ਬਟ ਸ਼ੀ ਵਾਸ ਫਾਇਰਡ from the BC Conservative Party by John Rustad. ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ she was not getting along with him. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਡੋਰ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਬਾਕੀ MLAs ਨਾਲ ਹੋਈਆਂ and so what transpired? So tell me the initial.
Also, I want to clarify, it's not that I didn't get along with him. It's about leadership at the time. And so what that meant for me is, there had been questions about irregularities that happened during his leadership review. Some of the conflict that kept occurring within the caucus, and, a lack of direction that I had felt at the time inside caucus. And so those were concerns that I brought forward with other MLAs that actually shared my concern. Now, from what happened that there was a lot of MLAs that shared that concern, but John fired me in September. So I've been sitting as an independent since then. But I have to also say that, regardless of that, I think that, now it was the right thing when John stepped down after being pressured. The party has a chance to reset. And regardless of what is perceived, as a conflict or anything like that, I actually have a lot of gratitude towards John. He invited me to run with them. I won my seat in Cloverdale, running with the Conservatives. He has been an MLA, I think, for over 20 years. So he's done a lot for the province.
Yes.
And that can't be minimized. Yes, I got fired, and ultimately John got fired himself from being the leader. But that doesn't negate any of the good work that he actually did for the province.
Totally, and I appreciate that. मैं इन्हां नूं कहा सीगा कि मतलब ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ Elenore ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵੀ getting along was not the issue. Issue was a lot of irregularities ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ happen ਹੋਈਆਂ ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ behind the scene ਜਦੋਂ MLA ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੀਡਰ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਵੀ behind his back or in a closed room ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਾਕੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਫਿਰ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਲਾਈਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਤੀਜਾ ਇਹ ਨਿਕਲਿਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਬਾਹਰ ਓਪਨ ਆ ਗਈਆਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੀ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਰੇ MLAs ਨੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਜੌਨ ਰਾਸਟਡ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਰ ਕਰਤਾ so this is politics is a blood sport, right? And the guy who was and baki jehda inna da kehna hai whatever as a politician because John Rustad is a very nice guy over 20 years serving the community one way or the another. He was in a Christy Clark's cabinet as well, serve on different portfolios. So ਜਿਹੜਾ community ਉਹਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ, we can't take away from that. ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨੇ ਸੇਵਾ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ time spend ਕੀਤਾ, we have to appreciate that and everybody should appreciate that. ਇਹ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦਾਅ ਪੇਚ ਆ ਅਖਾੜਾ, ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਚੱਲਣਾ ਹੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਆ. So what I try to say is, whatever you said and I'm saying, that you can't take away what somebody.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize also, CJ, like, when you think about where he took the Conservatives to. So when, he was actually himself, fired from BC United, he joined the Conservatives, and he was the only member of the legislature to be a part of the Conservatives at that time. It was not, trending high in the polls. They didn't have that blue wave of the federal Conservatives to ride along with at the time. But he was able to, through a combination of a rise in the popularity of the Conservatives, but also through his own work and ingenuity, took the party from being at that low, place to being the official opposition. Yeah. And so, regardless of what ultimately happened between me and John, I also think that people should still remember that, he brought the party to where it is today. And I think that it's something that he should be thanked for, especially if you're someone who's, a follower. And there's people that have been following the Conservative Party in this province since its inception. And we're talking decades and decades and decades, actually, of history with the Conservative Party, not necessarily legislative history, but history of a grassroots movement in the province that, it's pretty neat. And I actually feel pretty fortunate to have been, at least for a short time, I was part of it. And we'll see what the future holds for the party.
Yeah, so ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ ਨੇ, ਇਹ ਪਾਰਟੀ was nowhere from zero to becoming official opposition ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ. ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ BC Liberals, then BC United ਤੋਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ fire ਕੀਤਾ. Then he joined another MLA and just revived BC Conservative. And then they become an official opposition and pretty came close to become a premier at that time. And so ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ deny ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ. Now the big question is, Elenore, in politics, what happened is it happened such in all of a sudden. BC Liberals, Kevin Falcon make it a BC United, and in a no time when they ran out of money or whatever the other reasons, and they thought they might join hands, but he decimated the BC Liberal and BC United, and then give the rein to John Rustad, the Conservative Party, and then whatever he did. So now, where we stand, because people are not happy with David Eby or NDP and their policies. I can tell you, I talk to people on the road, I talk to people on my show. I have nothing personal against Mr. Eby or NDP party, but what people feel. What do you say? How we can unite center to right vote? First of all, before we get there, are you running for the leadership of BC Conservative Party?
No, I'm not running for the leadership. I considered it, and I had a lot of people reach out to me. My office was receiving just tons and tons of emails and phone calls and people stopping in, and that's just, I can't even begin to tell you what a privilege that is to know people believe in you in that way. But, I took a long time to think about it, reflected with my family. My kids, I have kids that are young teens, 12 and 14. And, also reflecting on, it's been a lot of work for me over the last year. And ultimately, what is it that I think I can do that would be the best right now for my constituents? And I decided that the best thing I can do is focus on the frontline job that I have to do today. I have people in my riding, CJ, that told me that they don't remember the last time that they had a roast beef dinner because they can't afford to buy meat. I have a young school kid who in my riding, he can't go to school because they don't have the right supports for his disability and behavioral health issues that he has. And his mom now can't go to work because they don't have respite. And so while as, a leader, you can do large things if there's an election, as MLA, especially as an independent, I can pick up the phone every single day and advocate for people on an individual basis, the people that live in my riding, that are depending on me to try and get results for them. I really feel strongly that I need to keep doing that frontline work right now. And honestly, some of the cases that we have keep me up at night because people need help, they're struggling. And so the reason I came in to be a politician is because I like helping people. I liked helping people when I was a police officer. And so after thinking about, the other thing is leadership races can get ugly. And I'm not sure that I wanted to put my family through that. And maybe that's, maybe I'm selfish to say that. I don't know what people think about that, but I have to think about their wellness also in a time of social media. And, and I just thought it's not the right time. I really will look forward to chatting with each candidate, and hopefully I can lend my support to someone and see where the party goes. But, I also think this is a time where the party has to define itself.
Yes,
and
yes.
We'll have candidates. We can already see some.
So let me tell our audience and viewers. Elenore ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਲਈ ਰਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ no. She decided not to run for the BC Conservative Party's leadership. ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਈ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਦੱਸੇ ਹੈ. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਗਲੀ ਗੇਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੈ. And I already said it's a blood sport. And social media and the media ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਅਟੈਕ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ. ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਯੰਗ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਆ. ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਭੁੱਖੇ ਸੌਂਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੇ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਮੀਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ, steak, forget about steak, like even having a proper meal on the table, and the young kids, sleeping hungry or going to school without food. It's a heart-wrenching for anybody, especially being a parent. And ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਉਹ ਮੇਰਾ ਫਰੰਟ ਲਾਈਨ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਟ MLA ਮੇਰੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਜੌਬ ਉਹ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ. And that's why she said I came in the politics, and it make 100% sense. We need people, well-meant people in this game of politics because it's getting dirty. And it's very important, Elenore. It touches my heart too when I talk to people like you, well-meant people, that you go in the trenches and talk to people that really need to be talked to. And you made a personal choice. People should respect that. But now going back to my second question is how we can bring, center to right kind of thinking people. ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ listeners ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ NDP ਉਹ left wing ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, unions and left wing thinking ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ. ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ BC liberal ਸੀਗੇ, they are centrist party, and then there was a element of conservatives there too. So to form a government, I know that very well, that they have to unite both kind of
socially conservative, but also people who aren't socially conservative, right? And
Yeah.
you need to work together. And CJ,
and fiscally responsible.
Well, I think that right from the center all the way through the spectrum of the right, I think one of the things that unites people is fiscal conservatism, fiscal prudence, responsible government, small government.
Yes.
And so that's not the trouble. It's, sometimes on the right, we run into trouble between social conservatism, right, and people who are not socially conservative, socially liberal people, you might say. And I think that we need to come to a time where we really look at the fact that, probably 95% of the things all of British Columbians agree on. We all want health care that's timely and accessible. We want every child to have a full stomach when they go to bed, and all these things we can agree on. And there's only really a small portion of things that we don't agree on in terms of, personal choices, let's just say, and different kinds of ways in which, their personal beliefs, their religious beliefs, their personal values. But the vast majority of things that we deal with at least that what government should be looking after, are things that we pretty much agree on. Just the formulation of how we address those things is slightly different. So I think I'm really hoping to see a leader come forward who is interested in uniting people behind the things that bring people together. And that can form strength, and not necessarily getting caught up on that small 5 to 10% of things that divide people. We've seen a lot.
Totally. Yeah. And so Elenore ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਇਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ center to right ਹੈਗੇ ਆ people ਹੈ ਨਾ, social ਵੀ conservatives and fiscally responsible ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ, small government ਹੋਵੇ, you know, responsible ਹੋਵੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ thinking ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ clear ਹੋਵੇ. I will bring those couple of question back to Elenore, and we're not taking the phone calls today, but anyways we will explain most of the things. I tell you, going back to your comment there, Elenore, that when the conservatives came in power and you were part of that they, certain issues, SOGI was one, you know, and for our viewers, sexual orientation and gender inequality, and some of the issues around you know, we will talk about the affordability and other issues afterwards. But then, you know, John Russ started going to Alberta and attending that right-wing dinner there. And those kind of sentiments gone off the rails. And for that reason, first 3 MLAs left, then 2 more left from the BC Conservative Caucus. And some of them have extreme views. Everybody's entitled to their views. It's a public have to decide in this kind of views. What do you think about that? Isn't it they gone a little bit too right to start with, and then they started retracting?
You know what? I honestly think that among us every single day, I used to get questioned all the time. People say, well, you know, you're a very socially liberal person. You know, I'm really conservative on law and order, very conservative on my drug policy, very conservative on my fiscal policies, but obviously I'm a socially liberal person. And people would say, how do you expect to be able to work with people who are socially conservative? And the reality is that I work with people who are socially conservative every day. And when we don't bring those things into, for example, the workplace, or we don't, you know, I'm sure that you even work with people who don't have the same personal beliefs as you, but when you focus on the task that is your priority, so if we get together as a group and we're focused on the task of fixing our economy, building a stronger and more accessible, timely healthcare system, you know, those are things that everybody can rally around. And one of the problems that we had was that there was a lot of focus on things that were quite divisive, even within the caucus. And I think that that is something that a new leader is going to have to grapple with. But, you know, for example, you brought up SOGI. And so I'll address that too. You know, people would say like, oh, how can, you know, Elenore, are you anti-SOGI? Well, I would say to people that, you know, the party that I belong to wanted to replace SOGI with something different.
Yes.
However, you know, I think that one of the things that we can all agree on, and even people who are in the NDP that I've had these conversations with, agree with me that, you know, we all want to see age-appropriate materials for kids. There's no argument. I've never met a single person who said that they wanted some inappropriate or bad, you know, materials in their kids' school or something like that. We all agree on that. I think where, you know, some of the, maybe the conversations have gone off the rails is that we haven't had that opportunity. It's hard to have these conversations in the political sphere without people accusing other people of discrimination or phobia, or it becomes these political touchstones where you can't actually even have that conversation anymore, where it's like, okay, well, tell me what your concerns are. You know, we used to hear stories about people saying there was litter box in classrooms, and none of this stuff is real. You know, some of these, there was books and stuff in libraries that some of them had some images in them that were probably, well, definitely not age appropriate for school. And I actually asked questions about that in 2024 when I was the education critic and critic for mental health and addiction. And I asked, at the time it was Rachna Singh was the education minister. And I asked her, and I actually showed her some photos of some books that were in school libraries here in Surrey. And they committed at that time in 2024, the NDP committed $350,000 to doing a refresh and reviewing to make sure that materials are age appropriate. So they actually did this work. But it's also about how you have the conversation. if we have open and honest fact-based conversations, I think you can discuss pretty much anything in British Columbia. But when we pit one another against each other, when we don't treat each other with the respect that's due, it's harder and harder to have those conversations. And when we use divisive rhetoric, it actually is a barrier to us actually fixing these problems. So, I mean, there are some controversial issues out there that, you know, people were like, oh my gosh, Elenore can't be a real conservative because she's gay, or, you know, whatever, how does this even work? But the reality is that, you know, of course you can, because regardless of who you are, I think that there's certain principles, for example, age appropriateness,
yes,
that are actually universal. And I've never met a person who told me that they didn't believe that.
So, ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਬੜਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜਾ ਮੇਨ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸੀਗਾ ਸੋ ਜੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਕਸੁਅਲੀ ਓਰੀਐਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਜੈਂਡਰ ਇਨਇਕੁਐਲਿਟੀ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ 5-6 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਬੁੱਕਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਲਾਇਬ੍ਰੇਰੀ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਐਂਡ ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਆਫ ਦੈਟ ਰਚਨਾ ਸਿੰਘ lost her seat being an education minister and she didn't win because a lot of ethnic communities and like you said, you were, you know, yourself LGBT community yourself and age appropriateness ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਮਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਹੁਣ 5 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਪਤਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਕੰਸੈਂਟ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਕਸ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੜਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਪਿਕਚਰਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੰਗੀਆਂ ਪਿਕਚਰਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਉਣੀਆਂ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ but that's a little bit too much going.
But and maybe I was going to say, like, maybe Rachna though lost her seat because what I was saying is that there's certain barriers to having these conversations. So if during the election they had been more forthcoming, the NDP, and said, yeah, we spent $350,000 to get rid of dirty books, that probably would have helped her.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is the problem, is that we got into this place where sometimes, CJ, we can't even have these conversations. I think that we should, and I think during the leadership campaign, we're going to see some of those conversations take place.
Yes, and there should be. You know, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ politics ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਇਹ topic ਬੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ sensitive topics ਹੈ and can be offending to certain people. I will give that as a disclosure, and I tell you, we need to talk about it because our communities deal with that on day-to-day basis. We can't cover that. And we will, like talking about this issue, we will talk about other issues that you're very passionate about, drugs and gangs and racism.
Yes.
You know, and racism kala color da nahi hega. You know, when we talk about racism, it's not about color, brown skin and white skin and yellow skin or whatever. That's one issue. Then a gender. Males and females, youth and older people, you know.
Absolutely. And discrimination can take many forms, you know, and we have to make sure we address it.
What is your take on that? And I thank you for very nicely mentioned that. The key point about SOGI and these things is age appropriateness. ਕਿਹੜੀ ਉਮਰ ਲਈ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਲਾਇਬ੍ਰੇਰੀ 'ਚ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬੁੱਕਾਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ NDP ਨੇ $350,000 ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਤੇ ਰੱਖੇ ਸਾਈਡ ਤੇ ਸਪੈਂਡ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ, ਬਟ ਦੇ ਕੁਡਨਟ ਕਮਿਊਨੀਕੇਟ ਵਿਦ ਪੀਪਲ, ਰਾਈਟ? ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਰਚਨਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਕਮਿਊਨੀਕੇਟ ਕਰਦੀ, she probably could have won that seat. So anyway, saying that and moving on to other issue of, you know, the racism, it is there. People try to, we talk about systemic racism. People push under the rug and think there is nothing happening. What is your take on that?
Well, I think that we've seen a rise in racism, especially since the pandemic, you know, but we also have a rise in mental health issues. One of the things that happens during tough economic times, too, is that people look for someone to blame. And that's a very, you know, dangerous thing when it comes to, you know, if you look at the history, right, of even the, you know, Second World War, right, looking for an opportunity to blame groups of people.
Yeah.
I think that whenever we you know, see history repeating itself where groups of people might be being blamed for problems.
And you're right. In a rough economic times, you know, look at that. Most of the countries, including Canada, cutting immigration, changing immigration policies.
Blaming someone
for that the Canadian-born kids, or regardless of color of skin, they are not getting the jobs, and the new people, you're flooding the country with the new people.
Well, and so I think it's important to remember when we have stuff like this happening, CJ, is like there is nothing wrong with us reviewing our immigration policies, because to some extent here we have brought in a greater capacity than we can actually handle. You know, it's created housing issues in our schools, you know, a overburdened healthcare system. And you're right, so we also have people who abuse the system. They use it as, you know, temporary foreign workers or you know, bring in immigrants to work in retail jobs or service industry jobs that could be filled potentially by, you know, people who are PRs or Canadian citizens. And we got to make sure that we remove that abuse. But what happens when we have these kinds of conflicts is we have to make sure that people just aren't suddenly blaming immigrants, because the reality is that they're following the rules that were set by the Canadian government.
And this country is built by the immigrants.
Of course,
yeah. If you think
and the
about
grandchild
it,
of immigrants too, you know, from Ukraine and from Iceland. And so, but, you know, this is where the danger lies and where we have to tread very carefully. And yes, we need to make sure that we pinpoint in our immigration system where the problems are, and also addressing overstays of visas. People who are no longer, you know, admissible to Canada should be removed.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean every person from that country is an evil person or bad. You know, we can't target groups. We have to look at individuals and their behavior and address that.
And it doesn't matter where the criminal came from. And if they have a criminal record, they have to be deported back. Doesn't matter which country. You know, it's not only that criminals coming from specific country, they're coming from all over the place. And Canada shouldn't be a safe haven. मतलब Canada ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਖੁੱਲੀ ਛੁੱਟੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਆ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਹੋਵੇ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਤੋਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਕਮਿਟ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ that's no.
You know, I just think, you know, when we look at right now, we're in a situation where you have the extortions. The government has talked about doing deportations. I think that they have in total deported 5 people maybe overall. They had a press conference where they talked about deporting 3 people. And they implied that they were related to extortion, but they didn't say where the extortion took place, what year. I actually don't believe that.
You being a former police officer, what do you think? Why they are not disclosing?
Well, because I don't think that those 3 people were related to extortion. I think that those people overstayed their visa, so they got rid of them. But they wanted to portray at the time that the government of BC and, you know, Canadian government police wanted to portray that they were having results on extortion, so they just characterized or allowed the public to believe it was from extortion. I think that because if you look, CJ, we just had charges laid in a shooting that took place on 32nd Avenue in Surrey. Awesome work by the police. I'm so proud of them. They also,
and they came out
and they told the immigration status of the person who's charged, that the person was on an expired visa. And so I think if you could charge this person and tell us their immigration status, then why didn't you tell us what other extortions those other people were linked to?
So ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ extortion ਕੇਸਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਡਿਪੋਰਟ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ, ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ probably they were not involved in extortion. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਪੋਰਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਵੀ ਚਲੋ ਲੋਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਵੀ 3 ਬੰਦੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੱਢਤੇ ਬਾਹਰ. So Elenore, being a former police officer, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ maybe they were not involved. So ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, transparency, they have to come forward and tell the truth.
100%, because I was saying at the time, this is before the charges on 32nd Avenue, but I said, you know, if these people are related to extortion, tell us which file. If they have a connection to these crimes, charge them, because then you can lawfully release their name. Then we'll know who it is. Then you can still deport them on their expired visas. So I think that was a mistake that they had let the public believe that.
And that's why, for that reason, in the public, when we talk among us, it's a lot of confusion about that. Like, what is the secrecy about that? So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ come forward ਆਉਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ, when you talk to the politicians, MLAs or MPs or whatever, you need to bring these issues. And now the next year, the city mayor election is coming. So you need to bring these issues before, in front of these people, that you know what they're going to do about that, and then make them accountable. After that, you know, if you want to really want to make a change or want to really, you know, get something done. So coming back to you know, when we talk about age appropriate, I just wanted your comment. I totally forgot. Australia recently, the first country in the world, banned people aged 16 and under can't use. It was effective today, I guess. but can't use the social media. You heard about it?
Yeah, I heard that. My kids were like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, are you going to
Not
take yeah, they're like, "Are you going to take our social media away?" You know, that's a very bold move.
Very bold move.
But I have to say, like, you know, I went to this really cool forum, and I was in it. It was a Jenny Kwan and the former mayor of North Vancouver, and also Elizabeth May was in it. And it was talking about violence against women and talking about violence. And, you know, one of the things that we discussed was how social media has really removed a lot of the civil ways in which we talk to each other. So since the pandemic, we started using Zoom, and we started using a lot more electronics, and you know, people are on social media all the time. And believe me, there's things that people say to one another on social media that if you said it to someone's face, you might not walk away unscathed, right? And so the boldness that exists on social media, it really has eroded some of the polite society that we have. And one of my suggestions is that we spend more time away from our screens and we encourage our kids.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily think we have to, I'm not sure that we have to ban all social media, but I'd like to see more investment in, you know, our rec centers and pools and make those things free and accessible to youth so that they do connect with people more and they don't spend time getting bullied online or, you know, or having these uncivil discourses where people are really sort of breaking that social contract.
Yeah. So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਏਜ ਅਪਰੋਪਰੀਏਟ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ 'ਚ ਹੁਣ ਰੀਸੈਂਟਲੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੈਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ 16 ਈਅਰ ਐਂਡ ਯੰਗਰ ਉਹ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਹੈ ਪੈਣਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਰਿਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਸੋ ਏਜ ਅਪਰੋਪਰੀਏਟਨੈਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਬੜਾ ਵਾਇਰਲ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਐਂਡ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਵਿਦ AI ਨਾਓ ਆਰਟੀਫਿਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ like they can put your face or my face and put a fake story there.
100%.
Like, where do you draw a line?
Well, and that's why we need at the federal level and actually even at the international level for governments across the world to work together on putting together parameters. You know, already artificial intelligence is stealing from actors and voice actors and you know, they're creating movies with
scams and
and it's just, you know, even online, if you're arguing with someone on, you know, Instagram, you don't even know if it's a real person or not. That's the reality of it, especially with all the weird names. But, you know, one of the things that I think makes it difficult, CJ, and where I think even if you don't ban social media, our economic situation that we have in Canada leaves kids alone a lot.
And not only kids, I will just because it's a holiday season for all our viewers, ਜਿਹੜਾ social media ਤੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ email ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ spam email, you don't know who it is. I tell you, I received an email yesterday, you are invited to 50th anniversary of blah 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 and please push that link to RSVP. I said, what is somebody is celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary and they will send me the invite through that. I right away,
it could be a scam,
I put as a block it and report it right away. Don't open that, oh, you won this that many $1,000 or CIBC or bank send you something. Nowadays have to be extra careful what these scammers are doing. Once you click that, they can extract all your personal information and they can do a lot of damage, right?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah, you got to be so careful. And they're so sophisticated. Actually, I had been reading about how they can use AI images to fake kidnappings. So send you an image of someone in your family being held hostage or something, and it's all generated through AI to extort people of money. And I mean, this is... You really have to be careful. I mean, obviously, if something like this happens, please contact the police right away before you take any further action. Don't send money. Contact the Surrey Police Service or your police of jurisdiction. They're there to help you, and don't pay. That's key as well. But, you know, we need to make sure that we're guiding youth, and we need to make sure that we're guiding young adults even and helping them to make those social contacts. And really, I think we can build a more civil society again. We can heal the divide that has actually occurred. And I think it's possible. So I'm really optimistic about that, but we have to work on it.
Yes, totally. And as a society, we're talking about the scams and these invitations. And then what Elenore said is, scammers, what they're doing AI, and they said, well, XYZ is arrested. They can show the picture. And then they said, oh, okay, you want to do a bail or something. She said, don't even send him money. You call the police or the contact information, and they do all the time. And they what they're doing with the seniors. There's a lot of, like we were talking about youth, but the seniors are affected because they're, your grandson is sitting in a, cop shop.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, all the grandparent scams, when I was a police officer, we used to call them grandparent scams. They would phone and say, have someone phone and say, Grandma, it's me, I need money, I'm stuck. And grandparents would get scammed because, of course, they love their grandchildren and they want to help. Right. And so, I mean, also we have to help seniors, anybody, and I don't want anyone out there, CJ, who has ever been a victim of a scam to feel embarrassed. I would often get people, that didn't report scams because they felt humiliated by what happened.
Yes.
But you know what? It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It just really goes to show the sophistication of these scams, because they can fool even the most clever person, even the most tech-savvy person. You can be fooled because they do everything in their power to try to trick you. So don't be embarrassed. Make sure that you report those scams to the police.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰਸ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਕੈਮ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡਸਨ ਆ ਤੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਛਡਾਉਣਾ, ਉਹ ਭੁੱਖਾ ਮਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੈਸਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ. ਸੋ ਰੀਲੀ ਕੇਅਰਫੁਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਚੱਕਰ 'ਚ ਫਸਣ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕਰੋ. ਸੋ ਵੀ ਐਟ ਦ ਸੇਕ ਆਫ ਦ ਟਾਈਮ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਮੇਬੀ 5-6 minutes left. Elenore, talk about, you're a politician, you're MLA, you're sitting as an independent. What kind of job you think NDP and EB doing right now?
Oh my gosh, well, yeah, I think that they're not doing a very good job. I mean, by every metric that I can see, they are failing. Our economy is not doing well. We have mill closures, just hundreds and hundreds of people losing their jobs in the forest industry. These are extremely challenging times because the ripple effects of these things, I just had a chat with a mortgage broker the other day who's a friend of mine, and telling me about the number of people who are trying to come in for debt consolidation. And unfortunately, housing prices have dropped. Yes. And the value of their properties is less than the value that they owe, and they're in financial trouble. I think that we're going to see a lot more of this coming in 2026. These are a result of the failed policies of the NDP. Yes, there's a world economic impact. We have a number of influences. Obviously, the tariffs and stuff do have an impact. But there's also housing policy implemented by the NDP that have also had detrimental impacts on developers, builders, and this is a really, really tough time for a lot of people across a lot of industries. So no, they're not doing well at all.
No. So मैं ने पूछा सी David EB the NDP क्योंकि politician right now, even she is sitting as a independent, इन्हें कहा भी ये ठीक काम नहीं कर रही EB ते NDP ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਬਿਗ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਮੋਰਗੇਜ ਬ੍ਰੋਕਰ ਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਫਰੈਂਡ ਸਰਕਲ 'ਚ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਲੋਕੀ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪਤਾ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਨ ਕੰਸੋਲੀਡੇਟ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ, lot of developers are in a trouble because with the leverage kind of investments at that time, and they're making tons of money, and then they borrowed money on 15-20%, and now the market is pretty much shut down for a little bit, and then people get into economic trouble like you mentioned. But but on the other side, today bank hold their key interest rates, not change it in Canada, but in America they cut down 25 basis points. But Canada, the primary rate is still sitting on 2.25, and Governor of Canada is saying that our economy is doing very well. We are not heading to a recession. But when we talk,
we're just skimming above recession right now, right? It's good though. I look, anything that says that we're making forward momentum is obviously going to be positive. I think that there were people that were hoping we would have another drop in the interest rate. Notwithstanding that, our economy seems to be moving in forward momentum, I think that there are a number of people in British Columbia who have continued to use property values, as a form of investment, to speculate and hopefully grow their wealth, that with this downturn in the housing industry has had a severe impact on them. A lot of people, even in our community, there's a ripple effect. So you have a closure of a mill, and industries within Surrey who actually manufacture machinery for mills, they feel that economic impact.
Ripple effect.
The ripple effect, right? And so we have a lot of uncertainty. There was a recent court decision that said that the Mineral Tenures Act of British Columbia is not consistent with DRIPA. That is creating uncertainty in the mining industry. In Surrey here, we have companies that manufacture mining equipment. So, you don't have to have a large mine or an open pit mine or, a mine shaft in your community for downturns in those industries or economic uncertainty to have those ripple effects. And I think, some of the uncertainty that's been legislated by David Eby and the NDP is hurting Surrey. And so I really hope that he calls back the legislature. We have some things on DRIPA that we need to, that's the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, that we have to.
What is a DRIPA is, again, for our viewers, because in a short term, so what does that stand for?
It's the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act.
And what is that?
So
what's the problem with that?
Well, so what the problem is, essentially, that's what's happened is that when this was introduced, it was giving basically a direction to lawmakers that we had to align our laws with the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous People, going towards consent and joint decision-making in British Columbia, and to align our laws with the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous People. And as a result of that, they subsequently made changes to what's called the Interpretation Act. David Eby did that when he was Attorney General. That piece of legislation is what tells judges and other statutory decision makers how to interpret every law of British Columbia. So what it basically says is that they have to now make sure that all of our laws, they must be interpreted as not to derogate from UNDRIP. So they have to be consistent with this declaration. We've seen now a couple of significant court decisions. One is the Cowichan Tribes versus Canada decision. That's that parcel of land. Now there's some uncertainty about private property
Richmond,
in Richmond. Correct.
Yeah.
And then last Friday, the Court of Appeal also made a judgment in a case of a First Nation with regards to the Mineral Tenures Act. And the judge, it was a 3-person panel, 2 of the judges in their decision cite this Interpretation Act, where they say that the Mineral Tenure Act is not consistent with DRIPA, right? It's not aligned with DRIPA, and so it's struck down. This is a problem now because it basically means that the system by which we stake claims for mineral development mining is no good anymore.
So ਜਿਹੜਾ DRIPA ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਡੀਜਨਸ ਪੀਪਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਉਸ 'ਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਚੈਕਸ ਐਂਡ ਬੈਲੈਂਸਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਰਿਚਮੰਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਏਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਘਰ ਪਾਏ ਆ, ਸੋ ਉਹਦਾ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕਾਫੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਆ। ਬਾਕੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਿੱਲਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਉਹਦਾ ਰਿਪਲ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਪੈਣਾ। ਆਈਲੈਂਡ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮਿਲ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਡੋਮਟਾਰ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਿਪਲ ਇਫੈਕਟਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਬੈਕ ਈਸਟ ਵੀ ਡਿਡਨਟ ਟਾਕ ਅਬਾਊਟ with all the shops are shutting down there big time.
Well, I should clarify for your viewers as well, repealing DRIPA, getting rid of it, doesn't mean that we're getting rid of Indigenous rights, because we actually have Indigenous rights enshrined in the Constitution since 1982 here in Canada.
Yeah.
And all of the court cases and, decision making that has actually been in effect from 1982 until now. But what DRIPA does is that we subsequently, David Eby and the NDP created laws that no other provinces have, that really have tipped the scales away from considering the greater public interest. And they're telling...
So it's need to be fixed.
Well, I mean, here's a question for you. Do you think that you ever were consulted and asked if you thought it would be okay if decision-making was joint and you changed the governance of British Columbia to give decision-making powers to people unelected and not accountable to the electorate? because that's what DRIPA does. And so, you know, one could argue that doesn't go along with Section 3 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yeah, so ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ conflict ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਚਰਚ rights of freedom ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, so ਉਹਦੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ shut down ਕਰਨਾ, they had to be not necessarily repealed but need to be fixed, right? So we have a couple of minutes left. First of all, thank you, Elenore, for coming on my show. We talk about a lot of topics, politics, especially the leadership. Do you have any favorite for leadership? If you are not running now, do you have anybody in mind that you like to be a leader or
It's
you
you,
will
CJ.
support? Eh?
I said it's you, CJ.
Me?
No, you know what? It's too early. I think that you know what? I can't wait to see all. It's exciting. I can't wait to see who all comes forward. I hope that the next leader of the opposition is somebody who has a lot of empathy, who really feels the troubles of, you know, everyday British Columbians, who's smart enough to be able to manage the overall economy, but kind enough to consider the, you know, pocketbook economics of families that are struggling right now.
Or maybe a fresh face coming from outside.
A fresh face, you know.
Fresh face coming from outside who is not even MLA.
Everybody loves a fresh face.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very much.
your time. So, ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ Elenore Sturko, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ very well versed in a lot of areas, as you know. You know, a good handle on, you know, law and order, talk about a lot of issues, ਆਪਣਾ leadership ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ John Rustad, the step down ਤੋਂ, and Trevor Halford, now MLA from my riding, South Surrey White Rock, he's the interim leader. Young guy, he don't have enough experience, so he already said that you know, he will not be running for the leadership, but he's an interim leader. So ਇਹ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ leadership ਲਈ ਕਿਹਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ if they get a good person, there is a very good likelihood that they might form a next government and that person will be a next premier. And you know, and if the right person comes, you will come back in the fold, I guess.
If they invite me.
Yeah. So if they invite Elenore, she will be back, and some other MLAs who left and sitting on the sidelines, they might join back again. So ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ Professor CJ Sidhu show every Thursday 7 to 8 o'clock ਆਪਦੀ feedback ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ. Holiday season ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, please celebrate with the families safely, enjoy this good season, end of the year ਹੈ, review ਕਰੋ ਆਪਣਾ 2025 ਗੋਲ ਸੈੱਟ ਕਰੋ 2026 ਲਈ. ਤੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਜਿਵੇਂ Elenore ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਚਰਦਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਮੇਰੀ ਕੋਈ ਇੰਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ, I have no intention coming back to the politics. I'm not in the politics, but I love covering the politics. So ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ. Have a happy, healthy holiday season and a wonderful weekend. ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ.